"This is my home," I cried, my voice trembling. "The only place your father and I shared our lives, and you're telling me to leave it behind like trash?" My son stood tall, jaw tight, eyes colder than January. "Yes, Mother, pack your bags. This is my house now. You don't belong here anymore." From behind him, my daughter-in-law folded her arms and spoke just loud enough to stab. "She's too old to matter, and we need space for a real family." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The flowers from my husband's funeral were still bright on the table. The black suit jacket he wore rested over the chair near the door, as if he'd step back into it and tell them to hush. The house felt like it knew him, creaking the same way it always had. And suddenly, it knew I was no longer welcome. "After everything," I whispered. "After the way your father and I built this, brick by brick, this is how you speak to me?" He didn't blink. "Pack your bags." I staggered to the bedroom and closed the door. My knees gave way on the edge of the bed. I pressed my face to his jacket sleeve, breathing in the faint soap and cedar he loved. In the quiet, I heard my daughter-in-law in the hall laughing. "Don't take too long. Movers charge by the hour." I folded 2 dresses, a cardigan, photo frames with our wedding day, and the first time I held my son. I took my husband's pocket watch, the one he wound each Sunday morning, and slipped it into my handbag. When I opened the door, my suitcase was already sitting in the hallway. My son didn't look at me. "Thank you for your time," my daughter-in-law said, as if I'd done a short shift in their home. "We'll take good care of the place." I walked out, each step heavier than the last. The air outside smelled like rain. The sky, that dull gray that makes you think of funerals, even if you've never known one. Across the street, Mrs. Cullen stood by her rosebush and pressed a hand to her chest. "Linda?" she called softly. "Are you leaving?" I nodded. She watched my son shut the door, my door, behind him. By evening, the whispers had started. "She's out," someone said at the grocery, days after the funeral. "Must have been trouble," another replied. "Children don't do that without a reason." At church the next morning, I felt eyes on my back as I slid into a pew alone. Sister Irene leaned forward and touched my shoulder. "I heard," she murmured. "Oh, child." From the choir loft, I saw my son and his wife enter late, hand in hand. They did not look at me. They smiled at the pastor. They smiled at people I had brought into faith with my own hands. And when service ended, I heard a woman ask my daughter-in-law, "Where's your mother-in-law living now?" "In a facility, I think," she answered with a bright fake pity. "It's for the best." I went home alone. Home. But not the one they thought. You see, my husband had left me 2 gifts. A deed to a second house across town. The kind of place with a deep porch and a kitchen that begs to be cooked in, and a bank card that opened a $700,000 account in my name alone, held safely beyond the reach of greedy hands. He told me about it in the hospital, voice thin but sure. "If they ever grow ungrateful, Linda, you will not be dependent on them. Promise me you'll be quiet. Promise me you'll be wise." I promised, so I said nothing. I let them believe I was broken, homeless, discarded. I smiled at Mrs. Cullen and told Sister Irene I was okay, and I took a taxi to the place no one else knew. The quiet second home where wind chimes sang soft and the floor knew only the footsteps of kindness. I set my bag down on the hallway chair, hung his jacket over the banister, and stood in the silence that belongs to people who have kept their dignity. But I watched them. Oh, I watched. At first, they peacocked. My son posted photos online. New chapter, our house, our rules. He replaced my curtains with cheap modern ones. He tore out the lilac bush his father planted the year our boy started school. He threw out my crock pot, the one that fed him through every winter. Minimalism, his wife laughed on a video. We're decluttering. What they called clutter was my life. Then the tiny cracks came, so small you'd miss them if you weren't looking. A missed utility payment. 2, a polite letter from the bank, then one with a red stamp. I heard, through the same neighbor grapevine that once judged me, that my son had taken a line of credit against his house to cover some smart investments. "Market's down," Mr. Alvarez said at the barber shop. "It's not a good time to be fancy." A month later, I saw their new car disappear, towed in broad daylight, the neon strap biting into paint that still had the dealership shine. "What happened?" one neighbor asked, phone ready to record. "Mixed up with the bank," my daughter-in-law muttered, pushing the stroller faster. "Temporary. But you cannot outrun the kind of trouble you've invited in for tea. Another month." The yard turned wild. The porch light went out and stayed out. Their smiles shrank in every post. The children started repeating words they didn't understand. Budget, and behind, and late fee. My oldest granddaughter, 10 and honest, told her friend at school, "We can't go to the field trip. Daddy says money is tight." My son stood taller, the way people do when only pride is keeping them from falling. In the parking lot after church, he laughed too loudly and patted a man's shoulder too hard. "Pray for us," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just little storms." Storms don't care about smiles. The day the credit card was declined at the grocery store, my daughter-in-law set the milk aside and said to the cashier, chin high, "We'll come back tomorrow." The cashier didn't say a word, just slid the items to one side like moving a small funeral. When the insurance papers came, long and printed on paper that looks official for the sake of fear, they didn't open them for 3 days. On the 4th day, I saw my son sitting on the porch steps, letter in hand, the afternoon sun carving hard lines into his face. He didn't move. I wondered if he finally felt what I felt on the day he told me to pack. 2 weeks later, the notice appeared on the door. Notice of default. The letters were big enough for a blind man to read. The tape they used left a mark even after they pulled it off, like shame does. "Linda," Mrs. Cullen said over tea at my porch one afternoon. Yes, at my porch, the second house. "I don't know how to say this, but they're not doing well." "I know," I said, stirring sugar into her cup. "What did their faces look like?" She blinked, then lowered her voice. "Gray, like dust." The bank came next, dressed in polite men with clipboards and eyes that never blinked long enough to see people, only numbers. They took photos. They measured a life with a laser pointer. They did not look at my lilac stump. They looked at square footage. When they left, the house sagged a little, the way old dogs do when the family goes on vacation without them. "Are you going to help them?" Sister Irene asked me gently after service, her hand warm around mine. "Help is a broad word," I said. "I promised my husband I would be wise." The auction notice went up a month later. You could smell the fear like overripe fruit on hot days. The lawn became a parking lot for curious cars. Men with sunglasses spoke into phones. A woman clicked a pen 6 times, never writing a thing. My granddaughter sat on the top step with her knees to her chest, picking at the paint. "Mom says we might move," she told the neighbor's dog. The dog leaned into her, unafraid of sadness. On the morning of the sale, my son stood beside the door like a guard who had already lost the castle. His wife wore sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. The auctioneer's voice rolled across the street like thunder. "Bidding starts at..." The numbers people say at moments like that sound like foreign languages. I watched from my car under a brimmed hat, the way you watch a storm you've already boarded your windows against. When the gavel came down, the house, my house, belonged to a stranger who waved kindly at the neighbors as if he'd brought a pie. My son didn't wave. He closed his eyes. By evening, they were gone. Boxes stacked into a rented truck, bags thrown in fast, children buckled in the back seat, cheeks wet. The porch light flickered one last time and surrendered. "Where will they go?" Mrs. Cullen asked the air. "Someplace with thin walls," Mr. Alvarez said softly. "You can always hear fighting through thin walls." And he was right. The apartment they found had a window that looked at a brick wall. The kids learned the sound of midnight arguments through the vent. The new landlord knocked the way debt collectors do, 3 hard times, 2 softer, and then again. Pride makes poor blankets in winter. They shivered. Within a month I received a letter, not from them, but about them. The school asked for emergency contacts. "We haven't been able to reach the parents regarding overdue lunch accounts," it said in tidy print. "Could you assist?" I brought cash the next day and told the secretary to keep my name off any thank you note. Humiliation needs no audience when it's teaching. That Sunday, my son didn't come to church. People whispered, "They're busy." The pastor looked from the pulpit to the door 3 times, as if waiting for a spirit that wasn't going to walk in. Sister Irene leaned over and whispered, "Some falls are long, Linda." I nodded. Some are necessary. Then came the motel. 2 weeks when the apartment deposit vanished into an emergency and the landlord changed the locks. The oldest slept in a hoodie. The youngest asked if this was a camping trip, and the middle one learned the smell of bleach that never really means clean. My daughter-in-law called her mother and cried without sound. My son called 3 numbers and said, "It's me," as if that would be currency. One evening, when the motel ice machine rattled like bones, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Mother, can we talk?" The next day, "Please." I did not answer. 2 days later, the doorbell rang at my second house. I opened it and found my son, my daughter-in-law, and 3 children with knees too bony from new thrift store jeans. "Mother," my son began, voice small. We need help." His wife kept her eyes on the porch boards. The smallest child looked up at my wind chimes and smiled for the first time in weeks. "You told me," I said softly, "that I didn't belong in my own home. Does a mother belong anywhere else, I wonder?" "Please," he whispered, and the words sounded like the tear in a jacket seam. I stepped aside. "Come in," I said, "but sit at the table. I have something to say, and I want you to hear it as people who can still be saved." They sat. My husband had carved the pattern on that table, little leaves running along the edge like a blessing. I set down glasses of water. No cake, no tea. "Water is honest. You threw me out days after your father's funeral," I said. "You laughed while I carried a suitcase past the neighbors. You boasted to your friends, and you told the church I was in a facility, as if I had lost my mind. But I did not lose my mind. I kept it. I kept it, and I used it." My son's mouth opened and closed like a man drowning. "You thought I had nothing," I continued. "You convinced yourself I was a burden. And yet, while you were shredding the roots that fed you, your father had already placed seeds in my hand." I reached beneath the table, brought up a thin folder, and laid it in front of him. He frowned. "What is this?" he asked. "The deed," I said, "to this house. My house. The one your father left in my name alone. The one I moved into the night you told me I wasn't welcome." His wife's chin lifted. "That's not fair," she snapped too quickly. "He's the son. He should," I said gently, is a word people use when they want the world to be kinder than they are. I opened a second envelope and slid out a bank statement. The numbers were neat and quiet on the white paper, but my son recoiled as if they shouted. "What? What is that?" he whispered. "Security," I said. $700,000 your father set aside for me. Offshore, clean, legal, untouchable. He told me where it was the night before he died. He asked me to be wise, because he knew. "Knew what?" he croaked. I looked at him for a long time. He knew you might become the kind of man who confuses inheritance with entitlement. My daughter-in-law's hand trembled. The smallest child reached for the pocket watch I had set on the table, and I let him hold it, because small hands should learn the weight of time. "We've lost everything," my son said finally, voice cracking. "The house, the car. We're behind on rent. The kids need stability. We made mistakes. I made mistakes. I was proud. I was cruel. I'm ashamed." Good. Shame is a teacher that arrives late, but it stays for the whole course. "What do you want from me?" I asked. He swallowed. "Help us. Please. I'll do whatever you ask. Just help us." I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed the white fence. Across the street, Mrs. Cullen carried a basket of laundry. The world goes on, even when you think it should pause. "I will help the children," I said at last, turning back. "They will not sleep in a motel again. Their lunch accounts will never run empty. I will set up a trust for their schooling, managed by me, not you. It will unlock as they grow, and it will teach them responsibility, not greed." Tears spilled down my granddaughter's cheeks. "Does that mean... can we stay here?" I said gently. "We'll spend weekends here. You'll know warmth and a full pantry and the smell of cinnamon on Saturday mornings." My son stared at the table. And us?" I said, and my voice did not waver. "We'll learn what it means to build a life without stealing it from someone else. You will not live here. You will not touch my accounts. You will not call this your house. You will work and you will earn. If you show me a year of humility and honest effort, I will consider helping you more. If you return to arrogance, I will turn this key so hard the doorframe remembers." He nodded, a deep, slow motion that felt like the first true thing he'd done in months. I walked to the counter, lifted 3 paper bags I'd prepared, one with groceries, one with toiletries, one with gift cards, and placed them by the door. "Take these," I said. "Feed my grandchildren. I will pick them up Friday after school. Bring them with clean faces and hopeful eyes." My daughter-in-law finally looked up. "Why are you... after everything, why are you still kind?" "Because kindness is not weakness," I said softly. "And because your shame does not purchase my bitterness." I escorted them to the porch. The wind chimes sang again, a little braver. My son stood on the steps, eyes wet, and whispered, "Mother, I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "I also know what sorry without change is worth." They left. The sun slid lower. I locked the door and set my husband's pocket watch back in its dish. The house hummed, the way houses do when they are safe. Word spread fast, how word always does. People at church stopped me with both hands on mine. "We heard," they said. "We didn't know." The pastor hugged me so tight my ribs remembered being young. Mrs. Cullen brought pie and apologized for the roses that had crept under the fence. Mr. Alvarez fixed my gate latch and refused money. "They thought they buried me," I told Sister Irene on the front steps, steam from our tea mingling in the cool air. "But they forgot I was a seed." "And seeds?" she asked, smiling. "Seeds always rise," I said. The next month, I hosted a small dinner. Neighbors, the pastor, 2 old friends, and the grandchildren on their best behavior, faces open like windows in spring. We sat at the table my husband carved and held hands for grace. I felt the old steadiness return to my bones. When dessert plates were empty, my oldest granddaughter slipped a folded note into my palm. "Thank you for saving me," it said in a child's careful letters. "I won't forget." "Don't just not forget," I whispered into her hair when I hugged her goodnight. "Become the kind of woman who remembers other people too." Weeks turned to months. My son found work, not the kind that grants pride on contact, but the kind that polishes it slowly. My daughter-in-law learned to budget the way you learned to walk again after a long illness. They showed up on Fridays with kids who smelled like soap and hope. They showed up on Sundays and sat in the pew in front of me, and sometimes my son looked back and didn't flinch. People ask me, "Why didn't you crush them with that money?" And I tell them this: crushing is easy, teaching is holy. Still, I did not forget what they did, and I did not let them forget either. There is a cross I keep at the doorway of my heart, and on it hangs a small sign. Respect is the key. When they cross that threshold with it, they are welcome. Without it, they can wave from the sidewalk. As for me, I sleep in a house that is mine by deed, by memory, and by the kind promise of a good man now gone. I keep our savings where greedy hands cannot reach. I bake cinnamon rolls on Saturdays and send a pan home with the children on Sundays. I keep my lilacs safe. They thought they erased me. In the end, they erased themselves from the version of the story where they were heroes, and I rewrote it, quietly, steadily, with the pen of wisdom. Thank you for staying with me. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe so you never miss another tale. And tomorrow, join me for the story. I'll tell you the story of when my son's wife slapped me at my grandson's wedding. Simply because I invited just one of my friend. You won't believe what I did next.